I would be trying to frame myself better, but I'm sinking into the snow. Anyways, today's video is all about budget. I want to figure out what's the cheapest way possible to start doing film photography. I want to make this video for those of you who want to try doing film photography, who want to have a taste of the fun without overcommitting a bunch of money right away. So I decided to challenge myself to buy a camera, buy film, shoot the film, get the film developed and scanned for as little money as possible. And of course I'm filming this video right now. I'm out here with this camera taking these pictures, and all of this costs me less than 30 euros. So if you want to start doing film photography yourself, maybe you can use this video as kind of inspiration to get started on your own journey. So I will tell you about my thought process throughout this entire challenge, so in case any of you guys want to follow along, you have all of the same knowledge I do. Do keep in mind though that this isn't supposed to be some sort of full guide to getting into film photography, because I'm not a professional by any means. I'm not an expert on film photography. There's more than enough actual professional photographers teaching film photography on YouTube. I just do it as a hobby, and that's why I wanted to make more content about film photography as a budget hobby and not as an actual professional photography pursuit. So this is really more a challenge rather than a guide, but you can see the pictures here in the video, and if you like them, I'm gonna tell you all about how I took them and how you can do the same. I'm on my way to today's location, but to make all of this happen, of course, I needed a camera. And the cheapest way possible, of course, is to use a camera that you can use for free, maybe something that a family member or a friend of yours already owns. Of course, if you're a viewer of the channel, you're gonna know that's how I personally started shooting film. I started using my grandpa's old camera. He had an old film camera that he wasn't using anymore. That was the camera I started shooting film on, and of course that was free. That's the cheapest way of doing things. But for this challenge, I decided to buy a camera as well, so it is still relevant for those of you who don't have a free camera. So, of course, there is actual like used camera stores like KEH, the camera store, stuff like that, where you're gonna buy cameras that have been reviewed and tested and kind of repaired, maybe even by professionals, and you know that what you're buying is actually going to be good. But that's a bit out of our price range today. Then I thought about buying a camera on a flea market, and if you know how to bargain, you can get some great deals there. And I've bought some cameras on flea markets, but to be honest, over half of the cameras I've bought on flea markets turned out not to work, because it's usually pretty hard to know if the camera you're buying works until you get it home, either because it needs batteries and the seller doesn't have batteries, or because the seller won't tell you if it still works, because why would they? So that's kind of, my success rate there hasn't been too great, so I decided to go with eBay or whatever online kind of retail platform you're using personally. But that's where I had the most success so far, and that's what I decided to go for this video. There's like a guy doing this stuff, you might hear it. So that's what I decided to go with for this video. Let's go buy a camera. So of course there's also going to be a bunch of people there who don't know what they're selling, who don't know if the camera they're selling does work, but you are going to find offers, stuff like this, where the seller did test the camera and can tell you that it works. Of course it's possible that somebody might be trying to scam you, but knock on wood, it hasn't happened for me yet, and this is how I got the best results so far. So looking for offers on online platforms like eBay where the seller has tested the camera, and that's what I buy. What you're going to be looking for is a 35mm film camera. So a 35mm camera, because 35mm film is the most common and the cheapest type of film you're going to be finding nowadays. That's what you want to be shooting if you want to do it budget friendly. Other film types are either less available or more expensive. So that's what you want to be looking for. So this camera right here that I'm showing you is not actually what I am going to be using in this video, but let me know if you want me to make a video about this camera. I would be down to order, because you can see 10 euros. So that's the price range we're looking for. So this camera is good for you if you are the type of person who has never used a manual digital camera before. If you don't know what aperture is, if you don't know what shutter speed is, if you don't know how to manually focus a camera, if you don't know how to manually expose an image. If you want to have the type of experience like a little digicam like that, or like your smartphone, where you just see something nice, you point your camera at it, you press the shutter, and the camera is going to focus the image for you, and it is going to expose the image for you, so it's not too bright or too dark. This is what you should be looking for, these small point-and-shoot 35mm film cameras. And there's ones like this one, I don't know what TCM is, apparently it's like for a coffee brand, or what used to be a coffee brand. Apparently this is like cheapo. But also you who know what cheapo is. I've used cameras like this one. That's like a German grocery store brand who sold cameras for whatever reason. That was their camera brand, like smaller knockoff, not name brand cameras, point-and-shoot cameras like this, from like 2001, 2002, that type of range, you're gonna find for pretty cheap. Alternatively, something like this is also an option. Those are fixed focus cameras, so think of them kind of like an action camera, if you know how those work, that are going to have a lens where everything is in focus all of the time. Problem is you might have problems with shaky images if you don't have enough light. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can see this is a brand new, never used camera for just €9. So an option for you if you want to have a super cheap camera that is going to work, but that's probably not going to give you the best results. I'm kind of tempted even to buy this and to just try it, because I'm kind of interested to see how this picture would actually turn out. So as I said, if you want to have the kind of point-and-shoot experience, these small non-name brand point-and-shoot cameras from like early 2000 is something I can recommend. I've used cameras like this, I've made videos about them. They worked fine and gonna be easy to use. They're still relatively young in the grand scheme of film cameras. Of course, still like over 18 years at least, but still relatively young compared to other cameras we're about to look at. The only problem is you are reliant on the electronics on those cameras still working, so they need batteries. The electronics need to be working. If the electronics fail, you're stuck with a piece of plastic junk that doesn't do anything. What we want is the real deal, something like this. We want to have a real retro experience, a real old mechanical camera. That's what I'm always kind of looking for when I do film photography, because of course those small point-and-shoot cameras are just so similar to a digital camera that doesn't really make a difference. And for me personally, I like to have something that's very different from shooting a digital camera, which is something like this. So here are two cameras that I have on my wish list right now. This is a bit more expensive, but it looks quite nice. I think this one is the one I'm gonna go with for this video. Looks fine, and according to the seller, it still takes pictures. So I think that's what I'm gonna go with. So if you want to find a camera like this, you can just go online and search for analog cameras or film cameras. What I like to do is use the search term viewfinder cameras, which is going to give you those more basic, older, cheaper cameras, and that's how I find the cheapest cameras usually. If you just want any specific brand recommendations, I think Voigtlander Vitomatic, especially the Voigtlander Vitomatic 1, is going to be a good budget option, and I really like that camera. Dakora is a brand you can look for, or Ilford, which is I think the same cameras just for the English market. Dakora is the German version. Agva also have similar cameras, although I've never used an Agva camera, but I think that's a brand you can look for as well. Or I guess you can look for Balda, because here it is. This is the camera we're going to use in this video. It's the Balda Baldessa LF, which is a 35mm film camera released in 1964. It's a viewfinder camera, a more basic camera, we're going to talk about it. I bought it off eBay for €7 plus €5 shipping, so let's add €12 to our money counter. And I'm going to show you how to use this camera, or cameras like this in general, because they're usually pretty similar. But before that, I want to talk about some of the pros and cons of buying a camera like this. A more basic camera, a more older camera. I mean, you're just going to get some of those real vintage looks. Right here you can see them, but there's also other benefits. So for one, many of these older, more basic cameras are either not going to have batteries at all. This one actually does need a battery. As you can see, the battery goes here, and I don't have any in there. I'm losing the built-in flash, which this camera does have, but I would need like a flash lamp anyways, which I don't have, and I don't need the flash anyways. So you might lose some functionality like flash, or like a light meter, but you will still be able to take pictures. But before buying a camera like this, I would recommend doing some research. Does it need batteries? Which batteries does it need? And will it work without batteries? Because some of those old cameras need battery types that don't get produced anymore. So you will struggle finding batteries like that. And if you end up finding a camera which doesn't work if it doesn't have a battery, then you have a problem. But I think many of these older, more basic models will at least be able to take pictures without batteries, because they don't have electronic shutters or anything like that. And that's just going to mean that there's less possible failure points on cameras like this, less things that can break for you to no longer be able to use the camera, as opposed to one of those electric point and shoot cameras I showed you earlier. If the electronics fail on that, you just don't have a camera anymore. This one will probably work for many more years. Now you will be surprised to hear this, but there actually is some disadvantages buying a camera released in 1960 for 12 euros. There's some things that can't do. You will be surprised to hear. So for one, many of these old cameras might not even have a light meter at all. You can see this one does have one. This right here is the light meter, but it doesn't work anymore, and it won't work on many of these old cameras, especially if you see a light meter like this, with this kind of this window with these dots. Many of those don't work anymore because they're just too old. And the light meter is what your camera is going to use to measure how bright the thing you're photographing is, and you're going to expose your shot based off that. So it's not too bright or too dark, but that's no problem because there's free phone apps which can replace the light meter in your camera, and it's going to be completely fine, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So next off is focusing, because what you're not going to have is something like an SLR camera where you have the mirror inside of the camera, and if you're looking through the viewfinder, you look through this mirror, through the actual lens, and you see the actual picture you're taking. That way you can tell if your picture is going to be sharp on an SLR camera, but that's kind of out of our price range for this video. What this is also not going to have is autofocus. Of course, no AI face detection autofocus, so it's a manual focus only camera. And you also don't have a rangefinder, which I'm not even going to attempt to explain how that works here, but basically a rangefinder is just another way for your camera to be able to tell if your picture is going to be sharp by looking through the viewfinder. This one doesn't have any of that. Cameras at this price range, you're just going to get a viewfinder which is going to tell you what's going to be in your shot and what's not going to be in your shot, but it's not going to give you any information about whether or not your shot is going to be sharp or not. For that you have to use this focusing scale you can see right in front of here, alongside with this depth of field scale, and I'm going to show you how to do zone focusing. It's not hard to do, I learned it in like 2 days, but there is some disadvantages, mainly if you want to take pictures like portraits or stuff like that, where you want to have a very shallow depth of field and very blurred backgrounds. That's harder to do with a camera like this, as well as doing any sort of close-up photography or focusing on anything that's close to you is also going to be hard. You're mainly going to be focusing on photographing things that are far away and having your entire image be sharp all the time. That's where these cameras are best. Well, I want to take some pictures of this lift we've just taken. So let me show you how to actually take a picture on a simple viewfinder camera like this. Oh, cool. I've broken the light meter. Well, it was broken already, but okay. Well, anyways, let me show you how to do this. So first off, we have to measure the light, and that's where I kind of made a mistake. For one, the maximum shutter speed on this camera is 125th of a second. Which for shooting in the snow like this is not enough, because the snow, as you might be able to see, is extremely bright, and only having this 125th of a second shutter speed is really not fast enough when it's this bright. So I basically have to shoot at f22 at all times, which I don't like, because that usually means the lens is going to be less sharp. It's usually less sharp at f22 than compared to pretty much any other shutter speed. Anyways, let me open up the app, and I will also just do a quick screen recording and just show you. So I have no idea if this is like the best app you can get, because this is the only one I've tried. It worked for me so far, but I don't know if there's any better ones out there. I usually don't use an app like this. I use a light meter that sits on my camera. I've made videos about that. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to use the free app, because that's what you are probably going to be using if you want the cheapest experience. Anyways, you set your ISO. We have ISO 200 film loaded, and then you will set your aperture on this app. So let's just see if I put this on f16 and then just, you can point on a certain spot you want to meter like this. I have no idea how precise this is. And then I can just kind of point it. I can change the focal length to kind of match what I'm going to be shooting with my camera. So 50mm is what we have here. I can also point to certain spots I want to measure for. Like let's check the brightest spot where, yeah, that's going to be overexposed, but we can't really do anything about that. The shadows, 1/160th, so you can still see it's still a bit too bright for what my camera's actually able to shoot at. And I really hate that I'm shooting at f22. I will also take some pictures at f16, just overexposing, hoping that maybe that's better in terms of sharpness. But yeah, let's put these settings in. So you can see right here, my shutter speed is this right here. And let's set this to 1/125th. And then this is my aperture. You can see the aperture usually has some sort of f like this, and numbers in kind of these intervals, 0.8, 4, 5.6, 8, 11, 16, 22. That's usually what you're going to see. Might be like a 1 point something here, but whatever. And shutter speed is usually higher numbers. Starting at 30, this is bulb. Don't shoot in bulb unless you have a tripod, really. Anyways, so you're going to see your shutter speed is the higher numbers. That you're going to set it right here. This is the aperture. Let's set that to 22. And then you have to focus the image. So you see this focus scale and you see this infinity marker. You're going to put that infinity marker on whatever aperture you've chosen. So for me it's 22, so I'm putting it here. If you're shooting at f16, this, 11, this, and so on. And then you can see the same marker on the other side here, 22, and you can see the number. So what this is meters, the one below. So it's somewhere in between 1.2 meters and 1.5 meters. So that means for me, I'm focused anywhere between 1.5 meters and infinity meters away. That's all going to be sharp. So as I said, if I wanted to shoot with a super shallow depth of field like 2.8, then you can see these are the markers and I have way less room to play with. Also focusing on anything close up is more difficult because you can see here, this is the difference between 1.2 and 1.5. But then once we get up here to infinity, 10 meters to infinity, like it's just way more easy to shoot at closed apertures with things that are far away. Now I want my film. Take the picture. So one more tip when it comes to measuring the light. It's usually smarter to expose for things that are a bit darker. So if I point the camera down like this, and you can see it wants to shoot at 400 of a second, but then all of this mountain would be way too dark. If you see, if I just pointed it like 1/160th, and usually that's what you want to go for more. So it's better to expose for things that are darker, as well as the things that you really care about being exposed properly. Don't expose for the brightest thing in your scene. So for me, that's the snow. It might also be the sky. And another possible disadvantage, depending on how you like to shoot, is that these cameras are going to come with fixed lenses that you can't change, and it's never going to be zoom lenses. It's fixed focal length prime lenses, so you're going to be stuck at the one focal length that you're buying. Another advantage of cameras like this is it's usually pretty easy to tell if it's going to work even before taking your first pictures, because you can just open up the bag and then look through the lens from the back of the camera. And now I'm just gonna first off put the camera on bulb mode B and just open my shutter. It's going to stay open as long as I hold down the shutter, and just switch through my apertures to see if all of the apertures still work. I can also look through the lens, and I do sadly see that there seems to be dirt inside of the lens. Oh yeah, it's pretty bad. So that is a problem. There is dirt inside of this lens. That might not affect the image quality at all, but I also have had cameras where dirt being inside of the lens will basically just reduce the sharpness of the lens and make your images more blurry. Let's hope that doesn't happen here. Another thing that's broken in this camera is this shutter right here. It does still work, but as you can see, it seems like there's a part missing here, and the shutter is very thin and kind of uncomfortable to press, but it does still use the camera. And now I can just open up my aperture all the way and just cycle through different shutter speeds, just looking through my camera and seeing if my different shutter speeds still work. I just remembered that there's like some trickery you can do. We can rate film at a different ISO. I could have rated gold at 100 and I would have needed to have it developed a bit different. I've never tried it, but I think today would have been the day that would have been really useful. Anyways, the smart option probably would have been to remember the fact that snow is bright and just use an ISO 100 or ISO 50 film. That would have been even smarter. But did you really expect me to know what I'm talking about? Well, let's just hope the pictures turn out somewhat nice. Talking about film though, let's talk about it. So for this video I wanted to shoot color film because I personally prefer color photography, especially color film photography. But if you want to have the cheapest film possible, usually black and white is going to be a bit cheaper than color. Or at least if you want to have the cheapest film possible, it's going to be a black or white film. As well as usually lower ISO films, generally you will be able to find cheaper ones compared to like ISO 400 or 800 or even higher films. Which means that really, if you want to do film photography in a budget, you're better off shooting outside in bright sunlight so you can get away with using lower ISOs. I've taken that advice a bit too much today. A bit too much sunlight for me, but well, let's hope everything turns out nice. There is actually physical stores around me that sell film, but what I usually prefer to do is order my film online. Look at online camera stores, dedicated online film photography stores, or just stuff like Amazon. And what I like to do is just look at the offers of these online stores and wait until there's some sort of sale going on. And that's just because film isn't cheap and the prices are more so going up. And to do film photography on a budget, it's best to wait for some sort of sale going on to buy a film, which luckily are quite frequent, at least on websites I use. There's two things to be careful about. So for one, if you choose to go with an electronic point and shoot camera, this camera might need your film to have a DX code, which is this silver and black thing you see right here. This code is going to give your camera information about what film you're using, and depending on what film it is, the camera is going to need to behave differently. So if you're using a point and shoot camera like this one right here, for example, it's going to need your film to have a DX code, otherwise it's not going to work right. So make sure to look at that, and if you need a film with a DX code, make sure to buy one that has it. I don't. The camera I'm using in this video doesn't need a DX code. Next thing to look at is usually you can buy film in rolls that have 36 pictures per roll or 24 pictures per roll. Just do the math, how much are you paying per shot, because usually the 24 shot rolls are cheaper, but you might actually end up paying more per picture if the 36 shot per roll comes out to a better price there. So just do the math. So what I like to go for, I usually prefer shooting color, and I just like going for ISO 100 or usually 200 color films by Kodak. So usually the stuff we have right here, Kodak Gold 200. There also is Color Plus 200. There's some newer ones that they're launching. I've never tried those, but I think those are in a similar price category. So just usually ISO 200 color film by Kodak is what I prefer to shoot. And that's also the film we're using in this video. So I looked at the office and I found a pack of 3 rolls of Kodak Gold 200, 30 euros. So that's 10 euros per roll. Let's add 10 euros to our money counter for this roll of film. And that's usually the price I look for. So for color film, 36 shots for like 11 euros or 24 shots for 7 to 8 euros is usually the price I look for. That's what I consider budget friendly film. That's what I buy. Black and white film, you're going to be cheaper, like 7 euros or less for 36 shots is what you should be looking for. And if you're looking at black and white film, I don't shoot a lot of black and white. Black and white film of my choice is Fotoparadies 200. Watch out, that doesn't have DX codes. Canton is another brand you might look at, but I've never shot that, so I can't actually tell you. If you want to go even cheaper, there is a cheap alternative, which is respooled film. I'm not an expert there, I only shot 3 rolls of respooled film so far. What that's gonna be is it's companies that buy big bulks of film from the actual film manufacturers like Fotoparadies or Kodak, and then they get that film at a reduced price because they're buying big amounts of it, and then they cut it up into smaller pieces and resell it for cheaper prices. I don't know how the math works out there that they can actually sell it for cheaper than the actual manufacturers, but I don't know. but it does exist, and there is some offers there where you can buy film pretty cheap. But as I said, I haven't really done it an awful lot, and as a beginner I always went for the main manufacturers. So Kodak usually was what I shot. Kodak Gold was what I started on, just because as a beginner having the peace of mind to know that you're buying from the actual manufacturer, I think is quite nice to have. You just have more of a guarantee that what you're buying is going to be good. Respoolt film, there's some dangers of maybe scratches on film or stuff like that, depending on how trustworthy the respooler you're buying from is. So that's what I started with as a beginner. Kodak Gold 200 was the first film I shot, and I don't regret it. I think it's good to have that peace of mind as a beginner that what you're buying is going to be good. And Kodak Gold 200 is a great film to start on if you want to have recommendations for a specific film. And that's of course what we're going with in this video, as I already told you guys. Do also keep in mind that I'm making this video from the perspective of living in Germany, so the accessibility of cameras, film and film development may vary depending on where you live. I can't really help you with that if you're living on the other side of the world. Well, this video took so long to make, I own a display case for my cameras now. How does it look? I think it looks pretty good, right? Anyways, I shot the roll of film, so let's talk about how I got the film developed and scanned. So I decided to do the same thing that I did with my very first roll of film as well, which is getting the film developed and scanned at a local drugstore / chemist store. I don't really know how to translate it. So there is a chain of drugstores here in Germany. You just bring your film in there. They will have those little pouches. You will write onto the pouch what you want them to do to your film, what type of prints and scans you want. Then you put your film in there and just leave it at the store. You're gonna get a link to track your order online. When it's done, you go back to the store, pick up your film, pay for it right then, and then you're gonna get your film here in a pouch like this. And in there you will get prints, the actual film itself, developed in case you want to do your own scans later on, and then you're gonna get just a link to download your images online on any sort of like cloud storage. I've been getting my film developed at DM for a good while now, and I had some really great experiences, got some really amazing pictures, some really amazing scans from there. And I also had some very bad experiences with some scans that I couldn't even post because they were that low resolution and just that bad. One tip that I would give is, if you live in a more rural area like I do, don't go to the store that's in your little town, because they don't really have the resources to actually make good scans. I would drive to the next bigger city and go to a store there. They're gonna have better resources to actually develop and scan the film in a good quality. Of course, it's not the same quality as like a professional film lab, but they're gonna charge more. And the price on this is pretty good. I paid €4.80 for those scans and prints. So that's just really great pricing compared to like those film labs where you have to ship your film to a lab. Those usually charge more than €10. I often pay €15 for just one roll of film. So this is just way cheaper, and the quality is still great. And this is what I go for if I want to have budget-friendly scans. Of course, if you search for budget-friendly film development and scanning here on YouTube, you're gonna find a lot of videos about scanning the film yourself. And I've done that. I was personally never really happy with the type of quality I achieved, because I really was trying to scan film myself for very little money. So I was doing all of the conversions myself in Affinity Photo and scanning with a lens that's really not that great. It's possible, and I got some great results, but I also got some fairly bad results, especially when it comes to shots shot in sunset and stuff like that, where it's pretty difficult to actually color correct yourself. Scanning film yourself can still be cheaper once you get into actually shooting a lot of film. So I would say you need at the very least a software for €100 or more, professional film scanning software or film converting software like Negative Lab Pro. And if you don't already own a great macro lens, you are gonna need one of those as well, or just a good enough macro lens. I have this Sony 30mm f3.5 for APS-C, which is not really that great. This investment can absolutely be worth it if you shoot a lot of film, and you're gonna save on those scanning costs on every roll you shoot if you scan it yourself. but if you're looking to shoot your first roll of film, it's absolutely not going to be cheaper. This is really only worth it once you actually shoot film consistently. So if you want to stick with film photography long term, that's worth looking into for your first roll of film, or for your first like 10 rolls of film. I wouldn't worry about it. I would just do what I did. Oh yeah, I also had some trouble with light leaks, but that's really just because of something about the film intake on this camera didn't work properly anymore, and when I rewound the film, I accidentally opened the camera while the film was still exposed. So that was a little shocker, but luckily I only kind of burned a few frames like this, and most of the pictures weren't affected. I was lucky, but something that the film didn't rewind properly, so I had to open the camera while the film was still inside, which wasn't great. So was this challenge a success? Kind of. So I got some really amazing pictures, and I think for the price I paid for this camera, for this roll, and just for these pictures here, I think there's some pictures that are really amazing. There's other ones that aren't too great. Mainly I just had some trouble with sharpness. That's kind of my fault, because this camera doesn't have a very fast shutter speed, so I had to close down the aperture to f22 for a lot of these pictures, and lenses just aren't as sharp at f22 than they would be at like f11 or something like that. So that's kind of my fault. Also, as I said, there is some visible dirt inside of the lens, so that's going to make the situation even worse. Probably just like a mist filter type of effect going on top of just shooting at a aperture that's too tight. That kind of made some of the pictures a bit more blurry than I would like them to be. But I got a decent amount of keepers as well, and I think shooting in a situation that isn't as bright, or shooting with a lower ISO film, would have for sure helped getting more good pictures. But I think for a first attempt at this challenge, this went pretty well, and I got some great keepers. And yeah, let me know if you want me to make another attempt. I would really be down to make a video like this, or to make more content about film, budget film photography like this in general. But for sure, let me know what you thought of this video. Is this something you would be down to try yourself? I think it was a very fun experience, and it's for sure something that I can recommend if you want to try it out. Of course, there's always the risk of buying a broken camera, or of getting pictures that don't turn out nice. That's just film photography. And I'm pretty lucky to even get some good pictures on this roll of film I shot here. But yeah, let me know if this is something you have tried, if this is something you want to try. Let me know if you want me to make some more content about more budget-friendly film photography options. Because despite the fact that many people online talk about how expensive film photography is becoming, and it is true that prices of film and development have gone up significantly since like film photography was actually like the main way of doing photography, obviously. But I still think there's some ways to have fun with not too much money here in film photography. In this video we managed to do it for less than 30 euros, so I think that's something that you can for sure try. Well, with that guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna have my outro screen up here with some more film photography videos, and I will see you in the next video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, like the video if you liked it. Goodbye.